And so now we're going to look at a couple of ethical theories that are going to allow us to apply ethics to the Doctor Who episodes. And our first one is called utilitarianism. It's basically, utilitarianism is a big concept, but one aspect that's normally taken out of it is an action is good if it produces the greatest amount of happiness for the greatest number of people. Often this is even shortened down to the greatest good for the greatest number. And it was an argument that was, or a ethical theory that was put forth by Jeremy Bentham, because throughout history, different philosophers have thought about what is good, what is morally right, how do we decide right from wrong. Different people come up with many different ways to look at it. But one that has stuck around is this idea that Jeremy Bentham started creating and looking at and examining. And then John Stuart Mill continued his work and expanded it further. So again, between the two of them, if you read everything, utilitarianism covers a lot of ground. But what we're really interested in this class is an action is good if it produces the greatest good for the greatest number. So greatest good for greatest number. And we are going to go through an example using our two ethical theories. The second one is an ethical theory started by a German, Immanuel Kant. In English, we always use the German pronunciation of his name. He's never pronounced Immanuel Kant. So please don't make that mistake, because anyone who has a college education should know this guy's name is Kant if you're discussing him. So his idea is what we call the categorical imperative. You can read through some of the information about it, but the second paragraph is what is important. You act only according to the maxim whereby you can will that it should become a universal law. In other words, whatever act we're looking at, we would expand it to be a universal. It would apply in all circumstances to all people. And so these are the two ethical schools, ethical theories that we're looking at. For example, the fires of Pompeii. So if you think about what the main ethical dilemma is, in this entire episode, it's an ethical quagmire. That's the only reason that the Doctor and Donna are there, is that the writers work this out to be an ethical issue. The Doctor often has ethical issues, but this one is in-your-face ethical issues. Does he use his knowledge to save all the citizens of Pompeii, or does he let history take its course and they are killed by Vesuvius when it erupts? So, under utilitarianism, we're going to look at the greatest good for the greatest number of people. In warning Pompeii, 40,000 lives will be saved. One person will struggle, a person being the Doctor. In his mind, the ethical thing to do is let history happen. But when we have one person having their conscience mended by, yes, I did the right thing because I stuck to my personal beliefs, versus I can save 40,000. When you compare 40,000 to 1, 40,000 wins, so it's ethical to save the lives. So in other words, the greatest good for the greatest number of people is truly a numbers game. Then with the categorical imperative, we are looking at act as if it were a universal law. So the Doctor saves the town from disaster, let's assume that, then he must save all towns from disaster. You start thinking about it in those terms, because when you look at a problem, you need to say, what if it's applied to all circumstances, not just this one, all circumstances. So if the Doctor is going to save the town of Pompeii, he then needs to travel through time to stop all catastrophes, like Chernobyl. Recently, it's currently just happened this past week, Lake Mégantic in Quebec, a locomotive and the train cars carrying oil, I think it was, sorry. The engine caught on fire, it was disabled. Then, for some reason, 2 hours later, it mysteriously became a runaway train and ran into the small town of Lake Mégantic in Quebec. massive fireball. They think up to 60,000 people could have been affected. It's a pretty big disaster. So would we want the doctor going in and saving Chernobyl? Yeah, when it's nuclear reactor melting down, we don't want people to die for that. This instance of some kind of accident that's going to kill tons and tons of people in Quebec, we'd want that saved. But now thinking of it as an American, what about Hiroshima and Nagasaki? Americans used those two cities and dropping the atomic bomb on these two Japanese cities forced their surrender into World War II. If we hadn't have done that, looking at it from utilitarianism, if the U.S. hadn't used that bomb to sacrifice however many citizens in each city were killed and have radioactive poisoning, etc., versus the entire world, the numbers game, the world wins, these people have to die in sacrifice. But if we look at it from a universal law, then the doctor has to go and stop the Americans from dropping the bombs and then let history play out differently. And so we would say, well, this is an example where, yeah, in some cases it's good, but in some cases it's bad. If we really say that the doctor then would have to go and save every single city that's on the verge of catastrophe, it's ethical not to act here. So notice in this instance, when we look at utilitarianism, let's go back here for a second, it's ethical to save the lives because it's a numbers game, 40,000 versus the doctor. In categorical imperative, it's ethical for him not to save those 40,000 people because we have different examples when we start thinking about it. And this is the idea of questioning it. You need to look at different examples, not just right away saying, Chernobyl, Lake, Mégantic, okay, yeah, we need to save those cities, so that would be perfect. You also have to think of and question the other side, the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You need to look at all of the cities who've been destroyed in history, and would we want each of those still to have been destroyed? And so it seems like, and this is an extreme example, you could easily come to the opposite conclusion, but just to kind of wrap it up in a neat bow for you, I'm saying it's ethical not to act, because otherwise, if Japan had taken over the world, how would that have been different? How would the world be different? How would history be different? So we want to say things needed to happen the way they did. In this particular week, I want you just to basically get into the idea. So I'm going to put a lecture question that I want you to do for Let's Kill Hitler, what I just did for Fires of Pompeii. I want you to look at utilitarianism, remind yourself what utilitarianism means, what is the ethical dilemma in Let's Kill Hitler. If the doctor assassinates Hitler, then he needs to go and take care of people who've committed genocide. Then we need to look at different examples and see, well, if the doctor has to now go save everyone who's committed genocide, is that ethical or not? And you need to come up with examples to support why you get to the conclusion. So you need to go through those steps, just like I did with Fires of Pompeii. This will be due by Sunday. So you need to wrap up this simple. I know it's going to be hard for you because I'm just throwing you in the deep end to work on this. But I want to give you something you can use the template of what I just did with this. That you go through with your example, figure out what the idea is. I tell you in Let's Kill Hitler, is it ethical to kill Hitler? Then you look at utilitarianism, go through kind of this idea. But yours is going to be a little bit lengthier because I've been able to explain to you what I mean by warning Pompeii, 40,000 lives saved, etc. You're going to need to write out why you think this, how you got to that conclusion, and then decide whether it's ethical or not. Same thing for categorical imperative. It's not going to be a paper. It's not very long. It's just 3 to 5 sentences each. But I want you to decide whether it's ethical to kill Hitler under utilitarianism and under categorical imperative.